Hey everyone, today I am back in Chaos Zero Nightmare, and today we're going to be taking a look at another one of my favorite characters in the game, Magna. She's definitely the one that I have used the most so far, both in the beta as well as in the official launch of the game, because she is the one that I got first on both occasions. She was the first character I got in the beta, she was the first character I got when the game finally released, and I even ended up getting another copy of her when I was trying to pull for the first rate-up character, Haru. I lost the 50-50 and I got another Magna. So I've been using her quite a bit since then. She is kind of like the mainstay on basically the majority of my teams, because she is a pretty solid tank. I really enjoy her playstyle as well, which is all about making yourself very tanky with a bunch of shields, and then whenever the enemy hits you, you're just going to be countering them, and that is kind of how she does most of her damage. You take the hits and then you just whack him in the face afterwards. She also has some other supportive capabilities, like providing the vulnerable debuff, which is a pretty strong debuff, as it makes you deal 50% more for every time that you hit the enemy, as long as you have stacks, which can be quite powerful when paired up with some of those heavy hitters like Haru, for example, who's got some very high cost cards that just hit really hard. So let's then take a look at how Magna works by taking a look at her cards. So for our basic cards, we just have the basic defense-based damage on her basic attack card, and then we have two shield cards. Getting the extra note on her potential unlocked over here will add one counter to these basic cards. So until you've unlocked your epiphany cards, these can still be quite useful for kind of getting the counterattack engine going that is Magna. We also have an upgrade called Ice Fragment. This will give you 2 crystallization and at the start of the turn give you 1 counterattack. It is a lead card, meaning that you have a 50-50 chance to reduce the cost of this card by 1. However, you do need to make sure you play this as the first card if that happens, because if you play something else, then it loses that effect. For epiphanies, we have a couple of good ones over here. We can double the crystallization effect, we can double the counter effect, we can turn it into an Outbreak of War card with a 0 cost, meaning we can just play this right off rip from the beginning of combat. We can also turn this into an offensive card instead, where we still get the crystallization, which is the shield at the end of turn, but now at the start of a turn you deal 200% defense-based damage to all enemies instead. That's a lot more damage than just a counter on one enemy most of the time, so this is a very powerful upgrade. It does come with the extra added cost to it, but there is a way around this. And then we also have a skill version where it gives 4 counterattack and then 30% counterattack damage on the next one. This one I try to avoid, I just don't really like this one that much, but the other 4 are all fair game. If you get one of these 4 with like a Divine Epiphany or something, with like an extra effect added on top, I am definitely going to be just taking that Divine Epiphany, if it's a good one of course. But otherwise, 4 crystallization is quite nice for the extra added shield. Outbreak of War can be cool to just play it immediately and then just not really have to worry about this card anymore. Also, if you just copy it, you can just play a couple of these at the start of your turn. Can be kinda nice. Then we move on to Glacial Iron Fist. This is one of her big hitting damaging skills. Most of Magna's damage is going to come from her counterattacks, but this is actually one of the cards that she can use to deal damage. And this has a pretty nice number on it and then gives you a shield based on 50% of the damage that you dealt. So do 200 damage with this, you get a 100 damage shield. You can then enhance this by making the base damage a lot higher to 347, which is quite nice. You can also turn this into a supportive card with 3 vulnerable instead, and again, as I said before, vulnerable is quite a powerful debuff that you can apply to an enemy. You can also turn this into an even bigger damaging hit, where you get 50% added damage from the shield that you are holding. However, the problem with this is that you kind of need to have a shield in the first place, and you can only really play 1 card prior to this if you just have 3 AP to give you a shield, unless you have some 0 cost shield cards or something, or you use a partner skill. So that's why I feel like this version of the card is a little bit awkward to use, but if you can get it rolling, then you could do a lot of damage with this. Personally, I have not really played with this one that much. Then you can turn it into an AoE card, where if you're hitting this on a couple of enemies, that can be a very big shield as well, and of course a lot of damage too. And then you can turn this into an exhaust card, where it does a very nice amount of damage, and then it also allows you to retain the shield that you get for 1 turn. Personally, I like the 2 on the left the most, just more damage for bigger shield, or apply the 3 vulnerable, very powerful debuff. The rest I tend to stay away with for a little bit. If anything, I'd take the AoE one, because that one still has some uses, but I'd rather take one of the 2 on the left instead. Then we move on to Ice Wall. This one gives you a shield, gives you 2 counterattack, and will also give you an AoE counter for 1 turn, which can be quite powerful in combat, where you're fighting multiple enemies or you have a boss that summons some adds. Then you don't have to worry about the adds themselves, because Magna will take care of them with her counterattacks. To then enhance this, we can get a bigger shield and more counterattack instead. We can get a bigger shield and gain 30 shield per counterattack stack that we have, so this can turn into a ginormous shield. However, we do have the downside of losing the AoE counter with this one. We can turn it into an upgrade card, where we just counterattack all enemies. We can turn it into an attack card, where we again deal damage based on how much shield that we have. And you can also just make it so that the counterattack applies for 2 turns instead of the 1. Personally, I like the left one the most, because it kind of retains everything that's good about this card. Big shield, lots of counterattack, and you get the AoE counter afterwards. The one where you just get a gigantic shield can be useful in some cases, but you do lose the AoE counter, which is kind of like the whole cool thing about this card. Turning it into an attack card, not a huge fan. Turning it into an upgrade card, I feel like you kind of lose too much of your shielding if you were to do that, so I'm not a huge fan of that either. And then keeping the counterattack on all enemies for 2 turns, that one's kind of okay as well. So for me personally, I would either go with the first or the last option. If I don't have either of those, I'd go with the 30% shield gain per counterattack to just get a fat shield with this one. The upgrade and the attack version I tend to stay away from. I did try and make Magna into like a pseudo DPS kind of, where I like went for all the attack upgrades on her epiphanies, but it just didn't really seem to work out that well. Maybe I'll just try it a couple more times to see if I really can't make it work. But I felt like just running her as a good shielding sustain character is kind of like the best way to run her at the moment. Then we have Frost Charge, our last normal skill. This one gives a shield and 2 vulnerable, so again, another source of vulnerable, really powerful. Then we can make this into a bigger shield and an even bigger shield based on how many enemies that are available on the field, so really nice. Bigger shield and 3 vulnerable instead of 2, also very nice. We can turn it into an upgrade, where we just apply vulnerable with our counterattacks. Could be cool, but then again, you're losing the shielding aspect of this card. We can turn it into an attack instead, where you deal damage 3 times and all the enemies you hit will get 1 vulnerable. This can be also nice, again, if you're trying to turn her into a DPS, but again, you kind of need all of the epiphanies to line up for that to work if you really want to use her as a DPS rather than as a sustain character. And again, I just have not really been able to make it work. And then the last one, we get 2 vulnerable and 2 counterattack instead. I feel like this one's probably the worst, because like you can get 2 vulnerable on all the other ones, or even more, and the 2 counterattack you definitely don't need. So I personally like sticking with the 2 left ones, shield and vulnerable, very safe choice. The upgrade could be okay, I guess, if you just want to stack up a lot of vulnerable, but it's a little bit dependent on how much the enemies are going to hit you. If you're fighting enemies that hit you a lot, then this could be really good, because they'll always have vulnerable on them in that case, but that just kind of depends on a case-by-case basis, and that won't always really work out. Sometimes just getting the 3 vulnerable here instead would be better. The attack versions, it's actually not that bad, it's decent damage, and then you also get vulnerable spread around on multiple enemies, potentially. Last but not least, we then have Storm of Bitter Cold. This is kind of the engine that gets your counterattacks rolling, as whenever you gain shield via an ability, you gain 1 counterattack. This also applies to shields obtained from your other characters in your team as well. This at base only has lead on it, so it can turn into a 1-cost upgrade, and the Outbreak of War on this card comes from me having her at E1. So at base it only has lead, but if you have E1, then you get Outbreak of War as well. Then, let's take a look at her Ego skill. This deals defense-based damage, and you get 20% more per counterattack stack owned. You can have up to 10 counterattack stacks, so 500% defense-based damage if you are maxed out. Quite a big number. Now, in terms of getting equipment for her from the Chaos Run, for example, there is one thing that I would really recommend you to get, and that's this thing over here. At the start of the turn, activate 1 random initiative card in hand. It's kind of a mistranslation, it should say activate 1 random lead card in hand. That is going to be this and this. So this allows you to kind of make these cards more expensive, like for example getting this big upgrade over here. This was a Divine Epiphany, so I got the 2 cost on it. I have the 200% defense base, and then I have the added 1 morale, 1 resolve, which are both really nice buffs to have, because morale gives you more damage and resolve gives you 20% more shield gain, so that's very nice for Magna. But I don't really have to care about the fact that it now costs 2, because this thing over here will just use it when I pull the card. The only downside is if you pull both of these cards in the same turn, then only one of them will get activated. But at least you can just kind of let it roll around if you really want to. It at least makes your turn 1 a lot cheaper in case you do have the Outbreak of War on this card. Because then it just gets used immediately. You don't have to care about spending potentially 2 AP on turn 1 that you might want to spend on some other cards instead. In terms of partners, I have personally been running with this one over here, Radel. That's the one I've used the most. It gives you health, and it also gives you defense-based damage whenever you're in the counterattack state. Not 100% sure if this is based on your counterattacks themselves, or as long as you have a counterattack stack, you gain the damage. Don't know about that part. But this is the one that I've been running the most. It maxes out at, I believe, 16% health and 16% defense-based damage. But I've given him to somebody else now, so I can't really see that here. And the Eagle skill is also nice, 100% shield, 1 counterattack. Just running this one has been enough to get me through all the content so far. You definitely don't need any 5-star partners on her or anything like that. However, I just reached level 50 on my battle pass, season pass, whatever you want to call it. So I've bought Aishlin for her, which gives me health and shield gain by 8%. And then whenever you gain a counterattack, you also gain 15% defense-based damage for 1 turn. This works out quite nicely because, of course, Ice Fragment gives you 1 counterattack at the start of turn for free. So you basically, as long as you're not taking any of the 2 right options here, you have that 15% defense-based damage up 100% of the time. I haven't done a run with her yet because literally I just got her before making this video, but I feel like she could be kind of good on Magna. Of course, if you have Erika, she is the 5-star from the standard banner. She is kind of like the best in slot for Magna, I guess, because it gives 15% counterattack damage. And then whenever you use a skill or upgrade card, you have a 50% chance to get another one. And her EP skill also gives you a bunch of counterattack and deals defense-based damage to all enemies. So she's probably like the best to use on Magna, but personally I do not plan on pulling on the standard banner for partners. So that is something that I probably will never get. Unless eventually I get her through the mileage shop or something like that. There still remains to be seen how generous they're gonna be with pulls in this game. So I'm not quite sure if that is going to be something that I will ever work towards. But until then, I'll probably just be running the Battle Pass Light Cone, or not Light Cone, Partner. And then I've run Radel so far as well. If you have the 4-stars lying around, Rachel is basically the defensive option where it gives you more shield gain and you also get a shield through her ego skill. Whereas Wilhelmina is the more offensive option, where you gain more defense and you also have that morale and fortitude with her ego skill. But honestly, all of these options work just fine. As I said before, I've been running a 3-star partner so far up until this point, and he's been able to get me through all the content. Her shielding's been fine, her damage has been fine, and well, what more can you ask for? Last but not least, let's then take a look at memory fragments. Honestly, the only thing you want here is the Tetras Authority set, 12% defense. Anything else is kind of whatever. You can also go for the 12% HP set if you have pieces of that lying around, because more HP is always nice to survive longer. But honestly, none of the 4 pieces are that good for her right now, so just the 12% defense feels more than adequate to kind of have. And then for ideal, there is no defense percent in this piece, so you just get crit chance, I guess. That's what I've been running. On Desire, again, you can't get defense percent, so I've just been running Justice damage for now. I don't have a legendary one yet. But then on the Imagination piece, that is where you can get defense percent, so definitely recommend you pick that up here. For substats, you're probably just looking for defense percent, crit rate, crit damage, and then also extra damage, I believe, because if I'm not mistaken, counterattacks actually count as extra damage, so it would make sense that this will be buffed by that stat, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. So that's what I do over here: crit rate, justice damage, and then defense percent in these 3 pieces, and then see if you can get like 12% defense from the 2 set as well. And I think that covers just about everything about Magna. She's been a really fun character. Again, like, she's the one that I've used the most in the game so far. I like slotting her onto just about every team that's out there. I've been running her a lot with Haru. Feels like a pretty solid combo, like you apply the vulnerable with Magna and then Haru does the big bonk. One of the teams that I've been running more lately is running her alongside Mei Lin and then Selena. That has been a really fun combo, which I'm actually going to be doing a Chaos run of that in the near future. So the next video I'll put out is going to be a Chaos run with Magna, Mei Lin, and Selena, so you can kind of see how that team works together. And you can also see how well of a solo sustain Magna is as well. You can also run her alongside Maribel, for example, so that you have like 2 counterattack tanks on the team. That can be really fun. You can also slot Amir in as well, because that way Amir gives the metallized damage every time you gain a shield, and then Magna gets the counterattacks every time you gain a shield. So that way you just stack a bunch of shields, you take no damage, Magna counters, Amir goes with her metallized stacks, and then you just slowly whittle the enemy down that way. Definitely not a good playstyle when you're thinking about taking it into Basin of Hyperspace or something like that. But it can be very fun in a Chaos run where you just stack a bunch of shields, you take no damage, and the enemy eventually just dies because of the metallized damage coming out of Amir and the counterattack damage coming out of Magna. So it was a fun team that I run in the beta. I haven't done it so far on the live game because my Amir just simply is not leveled yet. But I'm definitely looking forward to doing it at some point because I just thought it was a very fun combo. So yeah, looking forward to doing that at some point. But that's pretty much everything that I have to say about Magna. Very fun character. Definitely recommend you give it a try if you end up getting her. If you have any more to add to that, feel free to leave a comment down below. And with that, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.